Hi everyone, my name is LaRae and welcome to the Tie Top Sew Along video tutorial. We're going to start off with printing and assembling the pattern. Open your pattern that's associated with the size of your printer. What I like to do is print out the first page first so that we can measure the scale boxes. To do that, hit print, make sure you hit page 1 of 1, and go down, make sure you have portrait and US letter or A4 if that's what you're using. Ensure the scale is 100%. This is a very important step. Once you have all of those things, go ahead and click print. Now we're going to assemble the pattern pieces. I like to lay out all the pattern pieces on the ground or table before cutting out my size. Once you have that all laid out, I like to do the right side gets cut and the bottom gets cut. And this is for all the rows with the exception of the last one. That way you don't need to cut out the entire border. You can just piece them together and tape them. Make sure circles are matching as well as the hexagons, and continue on to row number 2. Once the pattern is assembled, you're going to cut out your size. Make sure you're not cutting out the size marking. You want to be able to see that, so just cut on the edge of that when you're doing it. Your pattern pieces should look like this when you're complete. Now it's time to cut your fabric out. Make sure your fabric is pressed before, and don't forget to cut the notches. For the back bodice, make sure your fabric is folded in half and the bodice is on the fold. So you're going to want to cut around it and not cut it out completely. For the front bodice, make sure your pieces are mirrored. To do this, I like to just fold my fabric in half again and cut on the outline of the front bodice, and that will give you 2 exact mirrored pieces. Repeat cutting all of these steps on your liner fabric as well. And it's also worth noting that the only piece you're not going to cut on both is going to be the ties. You'll pick either the outer fabric or the liner fabric to cut your ties out of. When you're done, go ahead and press those pieces again. Now we'll start with the ties. Grab one of your ties and fold one of the short ends about 1/4 inch over, right sides facing you. Go ahead and give that a press. Then grab the bottom of the fabric and fold it towards the center. Again, right side should be facing out, and you're just going to want to give that a press all the way down the tie. Repeat on the other side so that both ends are meeting in the middle and all right sides are facing out. Make sure you give these a good press because this will definitely help with sewing. Once both ends are meeting in the middle, go ahead and fold in half again and press. This is now where you're going to start pinning from the finished edge down to the raw. Then we're going to edge stitch all the way along the tie and at the finished edge. So you can see here that I'm starting with the good end or the finished end, and I'm going to back stitch on that and then turn the tie towards me and just edge stitch that entire open edge, and this is just going to close the tie. Repeat these steps on as many ties as you have. Now we're going to move on to the shoulders. Grab your back bodice and lay it down with right side facing up. Grab your front bodice piece and with right sides facing down, so right sides together, line up the top of the shoulders in pin or clip. Repeat these steps on the other side as well as on your liner fabric. Then using your sewing machine,
sew at 3/8 inch
on all of the shoulders. This includes your liner fabric as well. I recommend pressing the seams open on both your liner and your outer just so they lay extra flat once they're assembled. Now we're going to move on to the sides. What you're going to want to do is with the right side facing up, grab your front bodice pieces and line it up starting at the armpit and moving down to the hem. Make sure it's pinned in place. Do this on both sides as well as your liner. Now we're going to sew them together. Go over to your machine and at 3/8 of an inch, just sew straight down. Do this on both sides of your outer as well as your liner fabric. Now it's time for the sleeves. What we're going to do first is actually hem the sleeve.
With wrong side facing you, fold the fabric at the very bottom to the notches so right side is facing up. Then grab your iron and press down. This is just going to make it way easier to sew. Repeat these steps on both your outer sleeves as well as your liner sleeves. Then sew this at 1/2 inch and repeat with all of your sleeves. Now that it's hemmed, we're going to sew it together. With right sides facing you, fold in half lengthwise and pin.
Once pinned, you're going to go over to your machine and you're going to sew here at 3/8 an inch or 1 centimeter. Repeat on both sleeves for your outer as well as the sleeves for your liner fabric. Bring the sleeves over to your bodice and flip the sleeve right side out. Find the seam you just made in the sleeve and line that up with the side seam of the front bodice, making sure that curved shoulder is facing out and the cuff of the sleeve is facing the inside of the bodice. So I'm just going to insert it here and I'm going to line up those two seams so they're spot on, and then we're going to clip or pin. Next, find the notch that you made at the top of the sleeve. This should be directly in the center. Grab that notch and you're going to line it up with the seam of the shoulder. And then clip or pin. Now we're just going to work our way around, starting from top down on either side, and just pin the sleeve together. Just make sure there's no crazy bunching. It will look something like this on the inside. When you're finished pinning both sleeves, bring it over to your machine and sew at 3/8 an inch. Just go slow and steady with this. The most important part is that you keep the sleeve lined up with the bodice and where you're sewing is flat. As long as where you're sewing is flat, there won't be any creases or bunching. You should have 2 shirts in your outer and liner. Grab your outer fabric and flip it inside out. Grab your liner with right side out and place it inside of your outer fabric. So right side should be together. Now you're just going to go through and match up all of the seams. You'll want to pin the bottom of the entire hem as well as the top of the neckline, but leave the front open because that's where we're going to place the ties. Grab your ties and starting at the very top with the finished edge, place that finished edge inside of the shirt. So you should be seeing the raw edge hanging out. I like to leave about a 1/2 inch hanging out so I can see it, and I like to start at the very top for the ties. Pin that into place and then measure. Depending on your size, the measurements will be different. This was the size small, so I did about 5 inches in between each tie. But just measure it so it's even and then go ahead and place your ties and pin. To do the other side, just flip the bodice back over and just line them up. This will be close. I definitely recommend measuring though, again, just to make sure they're spot on. Now it's time to sew everything together. We're gonna sew the entire perimeter of this shirt, not the sleeves yet. Doubling over the ties just to make sure they're extra secure. Flip the entire shirt inside out through the sleeves and give it a really good press. Finally, we're gonna finish the sleeves. At this point, your sleeves will already be hemmed from the step before. So now all we're gonna do is sew them together. Grab some pins or clips and pin around the sleeve just to hold the fabric in place. Make sure they're lined up. I'm using a different fabric here and a different tie top just because it's easier to see the stitching. Once you're done, let's head over to the machine. And there's a couple ways to do this. The easiest is just sew over that stitch of the hems. It's just gonna look like one big stitch. And it's a really clean way to do it. You can also sew on the outside of it, so closer to the sleeve hem, and that'll give you a double stitch look, which also looks great. Just repeat this step on the other side, and that's it. You're done. Thank you so much for sewing along with me and for purchasing the tie top pattern. Visit my website and my Instagram at LaRaehandmade.com for more. Thanks. Happy sewing.